Awesome. Welcome, everyone. I think we have some viewers on YouTube. So we're really excited to be doing this Pre-Conference Institute. And this is the Pre-Conference Institute for the International Society on Traumatic Studies. And it's a conference that's happening in person. And we are doing this Pre-Conference Institute to talk about trauma and virtual worlds and how virtual worlds can be used to provide support for folks who are experiencing trauma. So we're going to hear from some psychologists, two of whom are next to me, and we'll do some introductions in a moment. About their work, and then we'll hear from community members as well about their experience of virtual worlds and trauma, and how virtual worlds and being an avatar can potentially help people with their trauma, as well as virtual reality exposure therapy. So as people have their words, if you want to kind of come place them, maybe like right over here, where I am, yeah, you can kind of come place them. And let's make them all small as well, like the small text. If you click on it, we can modify them and make them the small font as well. Great. And for folks who are on desktop, if other people in VR, you can feel free to grab the props and kind of bring them over for the folks who are in desktop. It's a little harder to move things around.
I'm having troubles moving mine around here.
That's okay. Someone can grab it from and take it as well. And one other thing I want to mention for folks while we're just kind of getting set up here is that in your quick menu, when you hit the tab key, if you're on desktop or the settings wheel on mobile or in VR, the quick menu button, when you open that little settings gear icon on the right, if you click on that, there's volume slider, music, and ambient. So you can turn off the music if it's helping you. So I just want to mention that in case it's distracting for anybody. Great. So we're just kind of compiling for anyone who's just joining. We're going to be talking about trauma today, and so we're just having folks use the text tool in their quick menu to put out what comes to mind when they think about trauma, like one or two words, or and we're just kind of compiling these over here to kind of get a baseline of what folks kind of thinking about in relation to this community event. Great. Did anyone? So I think a good, as you are doing this, a good next thing is for us to introduce ourselves as well while we're in Skip and Money. So yeah, Steve, do you want to go first and introduce yourself for our folks who are here?
Sure. Can you hear me now?
Great.
Lovely. I'm Steve Holland, psychologist at Vanderbilt University, and I've most of my work.
Can't hear.
Does that work?
Oh, I can hear him.
I can hear him. I can hear him.
I can hear you.
I'm going to turn on his global voice real
I
fast.
can hear him.
I can hear you.
One sec,
I can
Steve. I'm
hear.
just going to adjust a setting real quickly. I can find you in this list. Yep. Here we go. Hold on.
Again, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
There's a running joke in there
Yes.
somewhere.
Yes.
I'm Steve Holland, psychologist at Vanderbilt University. I work with Noah, got a great appreciation for Innerworld, although I'm virtually hapless when it comes to navigating within Innerworld. Most of my work is in the area of depression, and I'm no expert when it comes to trauma, but I do know a bit about the folks that are and some of the things that you can do. And as we'll talk further on, we can talk later on, I presume, but there's some things we think we've learned about trauma.
Kim, your push to talk just came off. So if you open your click on the toggle push to talk, there's a little bit of background.
I can toggle it for her.
Okay, great. And Steve, yeah, I just want to repeat the last thing that you said.
Not sure I remember the last thing you said, but basically there are things that we think we know about the treatment of trauma, And PTSD in particular. Not everybody who has a traumatic experience is PTSD, but there's some things that seem to work particularly well, even though most clinicians are a little avoidant about working with them. And I'd be quite comfortable seeing somebody treated for depression within kind of self-help communities like the world. I don't think we quite know yet how well trauma is going to work, but it's worth considering.
Fantastic. Thank you for sharing that. And Kim, if you open your quick menu, Kim, with your left quick menu button, icon,
Yeah, I can't
the
find
second
the list. So.
the second icon next to the mute button, the microphone, is a push to talk toggle, and you can click the, yep, there you go. And now you hold down the A button to talk like a walkie-talkie, basically, and on the right controller, and we can hear you while you're holding the button down, and when you release it, we won't be able to hear you. So if you want to introduce yourself as well, Kim, that would be great.
Sure. Sorry about that. I also put a word up here, and I'm not sure quite how to move it to the back. If somebody can help me, that would be great. Thank you. Thank you. So I'm Kimberly Hefia. I'm an assistant professor of pediatrics at Yale School of Medicine, and I'm co-director, co-founder of XR Pediatrics, as well as we have a new center now, the new Yale Center for Immersive Technologies in Pediatrics, and we focus on the use of immersive tech, so AR, VR, XR, other types of immersive technologies in youth. Mostly what I have done for the last 15 years is make video games for youth around a lot of different topics. We have done stuff on substance use prevention, risk reduction, general risk reduction. We've done LGBTQ bullying, bystander intervention. Currently, we're working on bringing a VR video game into schools that focuses on marijuana and nicotine vaping prevention. And we're looking at middle school students. But a big part of what we're trying to do is focus on some of those emotion regulation and coping skills, because, recognizing that a lot of kids are actually turning to substance use. Not this idea that everyone's doing it, they think it's cool. It's a lot of times it's around mental health, and it's they're dealing with some really tough stuff and don't really have the skills to necessarily deal with that. So we're really working hard to build in some mental health strategies and skill practice into substance use prevention video games that we bring into schools.
Fantastic. Thank you. And thank you for being here as well. We're really grateful, Steve and Kim, to have you here. We have two other speakers who will be joining us shortly, who will be able to introduce themselves. And I can introduce myself as well. I'm Noah Robinson, founder and CEO of Innerworld, and also my PhD in clinical psychology. And Steve is my mentor, my doctoral mentor, so at Vanderbilt. So it's pretty cool. I think it's unusual to be able to go into the metaverse with your PhD advisor. I don't know how many students to do that, so I'm grateful, Steve, for Steve is very open to trying new experiences and things that have been coming into Innerworld, you can see, for 43 months. So
it's been great, good fun. Although again, I don't know how to answer my own cell phone, so this is a real experience for me. Quick comment on Kim. Kim, I don't know if you know Emily Holmes, but she's getting some great data using Tetris in emergency rooms with people coming in for the immediate trauma, and sounds like it's kind of the same area that you're kind of plumbing. I think that's absolutely terrific what you're doing.
Thank you, and I have heard about that. Yes.
fantastic. Yeah, and yeah, that's really interesting. And Steve, if you just want to touch on, maybe for folks here who aren't familiar with that research, if you just want to touch on that, because the point of this, this event is kind of to have the folks in the community and at the Institute, Pre-Institute conference kind of coming away with learnings about how virtual environments and games can be used to help people with trauma. So maybe you could just touch on that Tetris work. I think it's very interesting.
Well, yeah, just a quick comment. I'm not sure I understand it fully. But a lot of what happened, well, not everybody who goes through a traumatic experience develops PTSD as a consequence, but a lot of it has to do with fill up in the slots of memory. And if you get somebody doing something that's distracting, like playing Tetris shortly after the event, as opposed to processing the emotions of the event, there's some evidence that working too much to process the emotions immediately after an event actually is more likely to help lead somebody to develop PTSD. But if you're simply filling the slots of memory during that time, it seems to reduce the odds that you're going to develop PTSD if you've had the misfortune of being exposed to a traumatic experience. And the data actually, I think, look pretty interesting there. And Kim, I love what you're doing. Again, I don't understand it fully, but I think it's exactly the right way to go.
Yeah,
Fascinating.
thank you. Yeah, thanks.
Great. And Steve, you can just maybe use the right arrow key to rotate kind of towards the audience as well if you'd like. Yeah, fantastic. Cool. I think that's great. It's a little bit hard to know on desktop where you are and facing and stuff. Uh, Fantastic. Well, I'm kind of curious if anybody here, I just want to mention some of the things that we're seeing for folks in YouTube and things like that who aren't necessarily able to read this, but I'm seeing a lot of really interesting themes from the text that people popped up when we asked, words that come to mind when you think about trauma. I'm seeing things like self-esteem issues, distorted thinking. I'm actually seeing distortion as a big common one here. Anxiety, unerasable pain, terror, healing, damage, self-loathing, guilt, shame, and fear, sadness. So a lot of intense emotions, intense negative emotions, and I see by distortion. This is often referring to a thought that we have maybe about ourselves that might not be accurate. That's leading us to have a lot of negative emotions. Did anyone want to use the raise hand feature and share about the word that they chose and or the term that they chose and why they chose that?
How do you use the raise hand feature?
That's a good question. So when you hit the tab key on your keyboard or the settings wheel on the iOS, the quick menu, there's a little hand icon at the bottom of the quick menu. And if you click on that, it'll raise your hand. And then we can kind of see who's raised their hand the longest and kind of go in order and call on folks. Fantastic. A sensible muse.
Yeah, I used 4 words. Sorry. But I think the most important one up there. So the 4 words were surprised, ashamed, grateful, and struggle. Struggle is the hardest one. Surprised because I never met someone that treated me that way, and it was slow. Ashamed because I'm ashamed that I allowed that to happen and didn't see it coming, and then grateful because I have my daughter as a result of it. And that's the one I think is most important, is being grateful for the positive that came out of it and not focusing on all of the negative aspects of it.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And I think that's a really interesting point that you're making, that trauma can be really difficult and have, really intense negative consequences. And at the same time, learning from what we've gone through can lead to incredible strength and healing, and surviving a negative situation can lead people to become more sensitive to help others, to, do incredible things in the world. And so I think that's a really interesting additional element. And also Steve and Kim as well, if you ever want to add anything to anything someone is saying or anything like that, or respond or anything like that, also please feel free to do that as well. Yeah, great. Calm Llama.
Sure, thank you. So I put stuck in the past, affects me mentally and physically, limits growth if not processed, and anger, why? So I had an awful childhood, and I knew it was bad when I was little, but I didn't know how bad it was until I became a teacher and a parent myself. And so that's where the why comes from, and the anger, because so many people knew, the police knew, social services knew, my school knew, no one did anything about it. And it was only until I started getting things like chronic fatigue, Oh, thank you so much. Chronic fatigue, amongst other things, and severe health anxiety, depression. It's ramped up. I'm in my 40s now. That a doctor sat me down. I've seen many doctors over the years, and do you know your body's keeping the score? And they brought out a wonderful book that I haven't read yet. It's on my, and I'm not quite ready to do it. However, many people here, many of the wonderful guys here have mentioned that book as well. And they're saying it's part of my brain that hasn't processed my trauma. So I know that I cannot move on fully, and that's why I'm in Innerworld until I process that trauma. And I'm incredibly thankful. Every time I come here, I'm meeting like-minded people with bucket loads of empathy. And this peer support is helping me tremendously through it. So one day I'll pick that book up and I'll be able to work through it. And and in the UK, this is really important because we don't have therapists all the time. We wait all year for rapid eye movement therapy to move me through this, and I can't get instant help. So thank you very much for Innerworld. You help me every single day.
Well, thank you, Kamlama, for
Thank you.
sharing. And thank you for sharing that. It's really powerful, really, really powerful. And what you've mentioned about the body, interesting. I'm curious, Steve, if you maybe want to comment on some of those neurobiological elements about the body's experience of PTSD and trauma. Yeah, I'm curious if you have any thoughts on that.
Just a couple. Number one of the things we've learned is that the single most useful thing to deal with trauma is to relive the experience with a good therapist or supporting group, etc. And most folks avoid it. Most clinicians avoid trauma. But there are three particularly useful ways of approaching traumatic experiences. Edna Foll has an approach called prolonged exposure, which is actually a little traumatic in and of itself, but it does work. Patty Rezek has a thing called cognitive processing therapy, which has people write out the traumatic experience and then read over it and talk with the therapist about that. If you're in England, the person I think is the person I would go to for talk or advice is Anke Ehlers, who's at Oxford, but has research groups down at the Maudsley and other places, one of the best in the world. And they can, again, they would encourage somebody to relive the experience, but particularly when they relive the experience, to take a look at what they think they learned about themselves, which almost always is unfair, self-referential, and not useful. And they have very good results. Most clinicians avoid dealing with trauma directly, and that's a mistake. There was avoidant as their clients often are, and everything we've learned is that is approaching it directly. You still have to deal with the issues that the trauma raises, but most of the PTSD symptoms come from trying not to think about it. And the more you can approach it, what you want to do is own it, get agency over it, and have it become something that turn yourself into a veteran of the trauma, not a victim of it.
Oh, Noah, can I say something back really quickly about that?
Sure.
Really, really quickly. So
Please.
thank you so much. So the rapid eye movement, I've been told it's building up to finding a safe place and processing that. And I'm utterly petrified of reliving that. And I'm so pleased you've told me that that's the, as research suggests, it's the best way of doing it. Do you have any kind of place to tell me or to send me on to read about how I could deal with that? Because we could only get very limited amount of rapid eye therapy here. So anything would be grateful, even if that's later on. But thank you for that.
Yeah, we can share resources. We have a trauma channel in our Discord, so we have a chat feature in our app, so we can definitely follow up with resources and make a note to do that. That'd be fantastic.
Brilliant.
And
Noah, can I
Steve,
comment? Rapid eye movement is actually an effective therapy. It's based on a scam, and that's not the first time in psychology that something works on the basis of a really bad theory. Francine Shapiro was a bit of a con artist, and the notion that waving a hand in front of your face or touching the body, etc., is going to anyway be facilitative is not all that useful. However, it gives clinicians something to do with their hands when they're doing the right thing, which is to have somebody relive the experience. And anything that helps you relive the experience is actually it's scary as hell, but it's a good thing to do. we did American Psychological Association did a review of the empirical literature probably about 10 years ago now, and the things that work best are reliving the experience and then working through what it means to the individual, etc. And our rapid eye movement does work as well as any of the others, but because it's based on an inaccurate theory, a lot of people dismiss it. I think anything that gets a clinician to work with you on reliving the experience and then getting a perspective on what it means. You're not responsible for anything mistakes that your parents made, but you tend to carry them on, and anything that helps you work through that stuff is going to be incredibly useful for you.
Oh, thank you so
Fantastic.
much. That means a lot.
Yeah, thank you, Steve. Yeah, Khan.
Yeah, hi. I put down like reality distorting and life changing. And from my perspective, like working in mental health, I think that one of the biggest things with trauma is that it changes. I mean, we're talking about like the body, the physical symptoms of PTSD, but also the mind, for one, immediately thinks that it's in danger very often. But then also like the schemas and the ways that you perceive the world are fundamentally changed. So you may, believe like the world is fundamentally hostile, or, if I do something, I'm going to be in danger. And so like these beliefs and these, what become your objective reality because you've experienced it. I think that's one of a really major component of trauma, and a way trauma work can work through it is like recognizing what your new reality is, what your new perception is, what your new schemas are, based on the experience that you went through and how your mind and body and all that experience kind of shifted reality for you.
That's really interesting, Khan. And I'm kind of curious, Kim, I know that you've been doing a lot of research in the idea of that virtual environments can help people shift reality and kind of, change someone's perspective or understanding of a situation. And although it might not seem at the surface immediately related to trauma, like the work that you've done with vaping prevention in youth, I think is in terms of giving someone an entire experience that can shift their perspective. So I'm just kind of curious if you could touch on that as well.
Yeah, sure. I also want to say I'm being very quiet, but it's intentional because I'm actually just listening to everybody in this entire process, and I'm fascinated. I think I have a million thoughts, but I just yeah, I mean, this entire thing here of having a group of people just sitting and listening to each other is just amazing. First of all, and in my head, I'm sitting here thinking of like how powerful this could be to kids, and how powerful this could be to especially kids in schools that just don't have access to any support at all, and are going through rough stuff, don't even have words to describe it. And I'm looking here, and you guys can send emojis to each other, and you can send kids, and some of these things they're just powerful. And I'm just thinking about how this could translate to kids. So even just this environment here, this is a virtual environment, but it is, being here and immersed here is very, very powerful. And the power of peers is so powerful. And we just, with kids, honestly, and most of, kids, their access to supports, any kind of supports, mental health, anything is coming from their schools. It's just how it is, right? And schools don't have enough capability to actually help very few, if very few kids at all. And most of these kids aren't even being recognized. So just the power of what you're doing here and sharing among your peers is just amazing. So I think this example right here is very, very powerful. The small things that you're seeing, like I just said with the emojis, and being able to share, and hearing each other, and having somebody looking at you and engaging, that does so much. Just with this environment, we don't even need to bring in anything else. You know what I mean? Like any sort of a environment that we're trying to mimic something, right? Like this is just in and of itself very powerful. But yeah, so we know with behaviors and kids, especially, and when I say kids, we generally work with kids up to, I say kids, but young adults, right, in their 20s. But pediatrics can expand up to almost 30 now, right? But you guys, I'm speaking to the choir here about the power of just being in an immersive environment. You guys can sense it. You sense like people are with you. You can use, you're transported. You no longer feel like you're in the room you're in. And for adults, we have a better understanding and we can separate like these worlds much easier than kids. So can you imagine the power that kind of immersive environments like this have for young people? We can really, really take advantage of that, fully immerse them and take, guide them in a lot of ways and really fully interact. Just on the physical part alone, oh, thank you. The physical act, like the part of just being in a headset, this always amazes me with kids. We only have their attention sometimes about as long as a TikTok. When they're in a space like this, they're not looking on their phone, they're not engaging with somebody sitting next to them, they're not on their computers. You have them fully engaged and fully immersed, and they are paying attention to what's there in their environment. And
Oh, I think her she
That was
might
so
have.
good.
She'll be back.
Not moved.
I know. I think she'll be back. She'll be back in a sec.
We hope so,
Also,
anyway.
we just had. So we actually had, of course, this happens during, technology always fails when you need it the most, but we had a glitch where nobody could actually log into our app. So that's why Skip here, who just joined us, Skip, you can come down and kind of join us at the bottom here if you want. And yeah, kind of fantastic. Skip is, we've kind of, yay, Kim's back. Okay, fantastic. Skip, we've kind of been we've introduced ourselves and we've shared to, and I think Ione is here as well. I want to come down. I saw Ione log in. I'm not sure if she is in the amphitheater yet, but Ione and Skip are our other two panelists as well who are here. And we've asked folks to kind of share some words that mean something to them related to trauma. And that's sparking a really fascinating discussion where the folks on the panel are able to weigh in and kind of share any kind of psychological insights of what the research says, or how it relates to their own work and things like that. So feel free to chime in as we're going through, folks. But I'd love for you and Ione, welcome Ione. Sorry about this bug that was stopping you guys from being able to get in. Ione, you can come down as well. Yeah, into this little amphitheater. I can move over here a little bit. And yeah, maybe one person could come between me and Steve as well. Maybe. Yeah, I think that's fantastic. But yeah, Skip and Ione, I'd love for you to both introduce yourselves now that you're here. And yeah, so maybe if you want to go first, and you have to hold on the space bar to speak, like a walkie-talkie. Then when you release it, people can't hear you. So if you want to introduce yourself.
Okay, hi everyone. I'm Skip Rizzo, and I'm at the University of Southern California Institute for Creative Technologies, and have been doing work with VR for clinical applications for a few years. And I find this type of metaverse world to be quite fascinating, even though I'm still a little bit of a novice, believe it or not, in navigating around in this stuff. But yeah, thanks for having me.
Awesome. And by a few years, how many years have you been doing research with virtual reality?
Well, I started the lab at USC in 1995, and back then it was very, the technology wasn't that mature, even though there were these type of metaverse worlds that were quite primitive and they were text-based, things like active worlds and Black Sun and so on. And I played around a little bit with that, but mostly my work is, involved developing VR environments that required a head-mounted display for treating PTSD with exposure therapy, or fostering role play training with folks on the autism spectrum for functional everyday social skills, and some cognitive assessment work, and a little bit of physical therapy, game-based work, and so on. So that's what I've been doing over the last few years.
Skip,
Fantastic.
you and I both at USC. Do you know each other?
Yes, I think Steve was saying I and Skip are both at University of Southern California as well. So
yeah, USC, the hotbed of VR.
Yes,
Yeah, it's really wonderful.
Ione, you want to introduce yourself next as well?
Yeah, sure, I'd love to. So hi everyone, my name is Ione Azawa. I'm an assistant professor at the University of Southern California. So I'm actually housed in the Department of Psychology, but I've been here, this is my second year at this position, but previously working very closely with Noah and Dr. Steve Holland. And we've been doing really, just really cool work also related to Innerworld, just really trying to understand kind of the improvements that everyone might be experiencing in terms of kind of symptoms, any kinds of kind of changes in emotions, and what might be leading specifically to that, whether it's the skills that we're teaching in groups or just kind of like the social support and the networks that are really developing between members. So really excited to be here. Thanks.
Thank you, Ione. And Ione has a great, and also has a lot of experience evaluating internet-based interventions for cognitive behavioral therapy and things. So it's a really fascinating research background. Also, I'm just going to mention one thing to our panelists here. If you open your quick menu using the tab key or the quick menu button for Kim, there's a picture of a megaphone, which is the third icon on the bottom. And if you just click that once, it will turn on what's called global voice, so everybody can hear you throughout the entire world. So again, if you hit the tab key on your keyboard, it brings up the quick menu, and then you hit that megaphone icon. It says toggle global voice, and that will turn on your global
Nova, I'm
voice.
clicking, it's not turning on.
Oh, interesting. Okay. In that case, if you guys just move, let's just move a little bit forward. If you just move a little bit towards the audience, so that they can, yes, that's perfect. Just so that we can make sure everybody can hear. Fantastic. Well, we're just kind of going through and hearing from folks who share a word or two behind us about what trauma means to them. And then folks in the panel are able to respond and chime in with research that they're aware of or things that are related to what folks are talking about. And also folks on the panel have prepared a little bit of, or talk about what their work is and what they're working on. So we definitely want to get to that. So maybe I think we'll go through the current hands that are raised all the way to do a unicorn. And then then folks on the panel can share any additional information that they want about their research. And yeah, and then we'll look at the time. We'll probably, we have about an hour left or so. So yeah, thank you everyone for being here. This has been a fantastic discussion so far. So right now folks are sharing what they wrote and why, and then we're kind of responding as a panel to each person and bringing in any kind of research that we're aware of and things like that. So yeah, Kate and Amy, do you want to go next?
Yeah, sure. So I picked guilt and shame or fear, just to be transparent, and recovery. And there's a stigma to it. And Innerworld has been life-changing for me because I come from a very wealthy family, and I decided to call in prescriptions to be really short. I went to prison, and my past follows me wherever I go. And it's like I felt I couldn't be me. I couldn't be.
Oh, she got disconnected.
Oh, no.
Man.
Bless your heart.
I think she'll be back in a second.
Yeah.
And wow, it was really powerful what she was saying. And we're really grateful for so many folks in the community sharing, these incredible stories, of their lives. And yeah, so we'll give it a sec for her to come back in. And Rudster, if you want to go next, and we can come back to Kate and Amy. Hopefully she's able to get back in.
Sure, absolutely. You can call me Rudy. My name is Rudy. I don't mind sharing that. I picked fear and anxiety, basically for two reasons. The first one was everything was fine in my childhood until I hit 9 and my mother passed away from cancer. And right away, that was a very dark spot in my life. And I think I blocked a lot of that out. And so that led to a lot of anxiety in my younger years, which of course led me to alcohol, which was my best friend for 35 years or so. And currently I'm in recovery. I just celebrated 6 years. Kate just came back. You want me to hold her or keep going?
Yeah, you can keep going. And then once Kate gets back to the amphitheater, we can have or continue
Okay.
sharing. Yeah, so please feel free to continue.
First of all, also thank you guys for being here. I really appreciate it. This is fantastic. Yeah, the other one was I just celebrated 6 years of sobriety, and when I think of fear and anxiety, I'm still full of fear because I basically don't know who I even am. It's I've been using drugs and alcohol basically, since I was 13, 14 years old. So now being at the age of 59, I'm trying to, you know, basically control my character defects and things like that. And it's been scary, and it's been very enlightening and beautiful and wonderful. It was the hardest thing I ever did, hands down, but it was also the most beautiful thing I've ever done, and as hard as it was so worth it. And I'm so glad to be where I'm at. And so I won't take up too much more time, and thank you everyone that shared before me. I appreciate that. And that's it for me. Thank you.
Well, thank you for sharing, Rudy. And, we're really grateful to have you here. And I think fear and anxiety are really important, are things that can really impact someone's recovery from trauma. I don't know if anyone wants to kind of respond or comment to Rudy, and then we can also come back to Kate and me. I know that you got disconnected during your incredible share that you were doing, so we'll come back to you next. But yeah, anyone on the panel want to respond to what Rudy has shared?
Nope, nobody. Okay.
No,
Well,
no,
no,
I will say.
I'm just kidding.
Let's do
No.
let's do Kim and then Skip. Sure.
Yeah, no, what I was saying when I was hearing you talk about this, dealing this with since you were 9, and just the importance of how we can reach kids early. And a lot of that's through identification of trying to find kids that need that support, but then also helping kids just get some of those basic skills that, you didn't have around, dealing with all of this. And I just thank you for sharing that. It really does, and I'm sorry. I'm sorry that you had to go through this, but to me, it is a reminder of how important it is to try to get to youth as early as we can.
Yeah, it's so strange. Like back in those days, like everything was so secretive and like swept under the carpet, and I remember like even going to school and like kids whispering about, and I knew what they were talking about, but it was, and I should have been in therapy right from day one, and but I've managed to survive, and thank God, I'm at my, where I am, and they, pretty much now I basically help other people, and that helps me, so in order to keep this, I have to give it away, and Red Eyed is a real good friend of mine. She's, we talk about it all the time. I go to AA meetings a lot, also, on top of Innerworld, and I've met some of the most sincere people in my life, and they've got me through some hard, parts of my life, and Innerworld is just fantastic. I love this so much, and the people in here are also some of the most sincere people I've ever met in my life, and I think that this is just amazing, and when I can't make it to an actual meeting, the first thing I do is put on my headset and come in here and and see some of my friends here that are in here, and it's just fantastic. So thank you all for being here. I appreciate it.
It's really really appreciate it. And yeah, thank you so much for sharing and being vulnerable and sharing your story and history. What Kim said is really powerful, that if we can have interventions that can reach children who are going through trauma, we can help folks avoid the consequences, maybe become more resilient as well, and kind of learn the tools earlier. And Skip, were you gonna add something as well?
Yeah, sure. Rudy, I was interested in your impression about the difference between interacting in a space like this versus like an in-person AA meeting. Can you weigh in a little bit on that?
Yeah, sure. Absolutely. Like, when I drive to an AA meeting, it's it depends on the meeting, but I've never been to a bad meeting in my life. You know, my fellowship is you know, I've been doing it for 5 years now, 5.5 years, and I've met some really amazing people. And so a lot of times I look forward to it, and then it's where I don't feel like going. And there are the times that I really think I need to push myself, and that's when I do go. You know, that I know I need it, because, you know, I can get a little squirrely real fast, you know, if I stay in my head too long, which also makes Innerworld great. You know, like I could pick up my headset if there is, you know, something that a reason that I can't go, something pressing that, you know, that I can't go to an actual AA meeting. I can actually come to, you know, Innerworld. But yeah, what I don't know what you meant, like the what else I don't know what else I could add to that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, well, I was just wondering about, you know, do you feel in this kind of a space that it's easier to talk sometimes? You know, we've
Oh,
done
gotcha.
research. We've been doing research looking at how people interact with virtual humans, with AI type characters. And, you know, we often find people are oftentimes more willing to self-disclose personal information when they're in that.
Yes, absolutely. I feel a lot freer on here, because basically you're kind of behind, you know, you're kind of hidden behind an avatar, and that gives, you know, you can kind of sit in the corner and hide somewhere, or you can come out in front and share what you want to share, you know, which has a lot of power to it. You know, it's like, you know, people that are kind of like sneaking around meetings and just listening to them, you know, that's amazing, because eventually they're going to want to chime in, you know. Whereas, you know, an actual meeting, you're kind of there and you're not forced to put your hand up, but you know, some meetings you are, you know, they want you to share. I can't really say that. That's not really true. I mean, I guess it depends where you are, you know, but I mean, I definitely feel more comfortable in the inner world, you know, because I'm in my living room for one thing, you know, I have my cat's right there and the refrigerator's over there, you know, so I got it made as far as that goes. But it's just fantastic, you know. And Noah, thank you for coming up with, you know, this whole idea. It's just amazing, man. You know, you guys are fantastic. It's a wonderful idea.
Thanks, Rudy. And I'm actually curious, Skip's question here. You can hit the tab, you can open your quick menu and use the emojis at the top. You can do thumbs up or thumbs down. How many people here feel more comfortable disclosing vulnerable things in a virtual environment than they do in the real world? I'm just kind of curious. Seeing a lot of thumbs up. Yeah, interesting. I think it's it seems like a property of the virtual environment and the avatar. Like Skip's done a lot of research on this, and Kim as well. That that's a unique thing about virtual reality, is that it has a sense of presence where you feel like you're with other people, and it's anonymous at the same time.
Exactly.
And it's really the only technology that can do that, I think, where you really have that sense of interpersonal connection. And we know that thing. Actually, maybe Ione, you could just mention non-specific effects and what we know about and how that relates to this connection before we move to Kate and Amy. Oh.
Yeah, of course. So yeah, a lot of work with just kind of like face-to-face therapy in the real world and like outside of the inner world. And it's been one of these kinds of factors where we see, like in therapy, just having that connection with the therapist or with other group members can be really effective in helping someone feel better or kind of overcome, you know, if they're feeling depressed or anxious. But in here, we're seeing that it's even just more than that. It's a lot of like the community, that sense of like social support and building that kind of network that really seems to go above and beyond just, yeah, the relationship with, let's say, a therapist. So we've done a little bit of work on that. And so it's really great to even hear everyone's individual experiences that are really hinting at this.
Thank you. Thank you, Ione.
Thank you.
Yeah, Steve, were you going to answer that?
Say, I'm a big fan of professional therapists. I think they have a real role to play, but about 2/3 of the effects comes from the non-specifics. And those are the kind of things you get with just people helping people. And the substance abuse groups, the Innerworld, these kind of things, what you guys are doing with one another is about 2/3 of the effects of what we get from trained therapists. So more power to it.
Interesting, interesting. Yeah. So Steve's saying that 2/3 of the effect of therapy when someone's seeing a therapist and experiencing, improvements in their symptoms is due to that relationship that you're building with the therapist. It's not necessarily due to who the therapist is or what type of therapy you're receiving. It's just having that interpersonal connection and human relationship. And so that's what in a virtual environment, and especially if someone's, talking about trauma and trying to have that support and connection and validation from other people, having that can be a really powerful intervention, even when a therapist is not present. Since in the Innerworld we don't have therapy right now, and all of our meetings are led by non-therapists who we train. So thank you all. Yeah, Kate and Amy, I know that you got. Oh yeah, go ahead.
Not only the 2/3 of the overall effects are done by people helping people, but you really have to get up the severity, chronicity, comorbidity continuums before having a trained therapist begins to make a difference, or having an active medication begins to make a difference. It's not just that 2/3 of the effect comes from people helping people. It's that for most folks, that's going to be more than sufficient.
That's very interesting. Yeah, I think.
I want to also add too, we see this with kids too, which is fascinating, right? That peer-to-peer support groups with kids is actually one of the most effective interventions that you can have, which is surprising, right? Like you would think that we need adults, but actually young people supporting young people is really powerful.
Very
That's
interesting.
amazing.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that, Kim. I think that's really powerful. Leroy, you can did you have a question real fast? And then we can go to Katie. Great. Okay, Kate and Amy.
Sorry, I don't know what happened. Anyway, so there was always a stigma for me. Like I couldn't, go to a country club or anywhere where I was around my family or friends without being judged because of my past. And I realized Innerworld has been life-changing. I got certified as a peer recovery coach, and I found that even when I was in prison, I wish this could be because there's rehabilitation with people believe in people and don't judge. There is rehabilitation, and I'm living proof of that. I even had my son in prison and shared my story through the addiction series. So I'm not bragging, I'm just saying Innerworld is life-changing because I don't have to have fear. People can come and they can be who they are and who they want to be without fearing that look or seeing that look or that judgment. And it's very emotional for me because of how big of an impact Innerworld has become. When you're in prison, you get out, you go to I've been to meetings, all those things, but it's that in the therapy. I want to say this really quickly. I'm squirreling, sorry. If I'm talking to a therapist, and therapists are great, but sometimes if they haven't been in recovery or they don't have that mental health, but if a peer does and they have been there, like a guide, something, we can relate to something that someone has said or shared, and that has become life-changing for me. And that's why I went and got certified. You can actually get certified for free. And to me, that's helped me more than anything has. And like I said, I wish you could get Innerworld into all the prisons, and because they do have certain things, because there's hope. And I think that even for kids, like I said, I went to prison and I got a ticket for destruction of state property because I played volleyball and got sunburnt. I was property, and went through a lot of trauma. Here, I can be whoever I want to be, and I don't have to have fear of it and fear of judgment. And so, and I could go on, and Noah, thank you for developing this. It's just been life-changing, and I appreciate you and everybody. That's all. I'm sorry, I won't take any more time.
Thank
Can
you.
I
You are
real
loved,
quick on
Kate.
this?
You are loved.
Yes, please go ahead, Skip.
Nami, Kate Nami, I think you bring up a really good point on the prison element, because I've always felt that, if you want to foster rehabilitation in a prison system, you've got to help people to learn to have relationships, not just with fellow prisoners, but, to develop relationships with, non-prisoner folks. I'm having a hard time coming up with the right word here to be politically correct, but if, this was an option where people could interact with people outside of prison and develop relationships, learn to have relationships, talk to people that weren't in jail, maybe that would prepare them a little better for when they get released, so that their only relationships aren't just with people in prison. The relationships would evolve outside to some degree. I think there's a real positive learning experience there that can be done, not just with, social skill, but the emotional element of connection that I think is really important.
Yes. Thank you for sharing that, Skip. I think that's a really good point. And I also, Kate and Amy, what you've said is really powerful. And, I think that I worked in prisons and forensic hospitals when I was in college and trying to eliminate the use of seclusion and restraint and implement trauma-informed care. And trauma-informed care means that behaviors, the ways that the system is structured, the ways that being able to shower with a shower curtain, actually, having some privacy, having some ways that people aren't getting triggered, repeatedly, can lead to a decrease, a significant decrease, not only helping with rehabilitation, but also decreasing violence and other kinds of things happening in the prison. And so a lot of the systems of trauma-informed care can be really powerful. And I agree that the peer-based intervention and accessing, a peer support network from that, from prison could be an incredibly powerful thing. So I really appreciate your.
Can I say something real quick? You said something about the
Yeah,
the
sure.
shower. So and that's so true. However, in prison, and I'm just going to speak freely about this because I actually started the first newspaper, women's newspaper, mentor group. They put in clear shower curtains. In women prisons, there's more men working than women. So when you take a shower, I'm not going to go into it, and many things happen. I'm not going to go into that either. There just needs to be change. I know they started the PREA prison Rape Elimination Act, but that's not enough. There's too many men working. There's too many things that just go unheard and unsaid. And if you've worked in there, then you know. But there is hope, and I think that stigma of that inmate number, it sits with you for the rest of your life, just like being an addict does. And I've been sober since November 24th of 2018, and still, I'm called a dummy or names. My past follows me, and the change has to. I don't know. I'm very passionate also with CBT and logotherapy, which I don't know if you know about that, but it's finding purpose and unavoidable suffering. And I'm not saying that people shouldn't be in prison for their actions. However, I started a group and there was girls in there that committed crimes, but yet their parents pimped them out at the age of 6 or things like that. So this Innerworld is something that could be life-changing. And I know there's wardens that would be open to it. And other, even in rehabilitations, I worked in a rehab, and this would be, oh my gosh, it's giving me chills. How much it's helped. It really has. That's all. Sorry.
Thank you for sharing, Kate and Amy. Yeah, we're really grateful to have you here and have your perspective. Yes, thank you so much. So we have Spartan Zen, and I know Do a Unicorn. I think you got disconnected, but you've had your hand up as well for a very long time. So and then I think we had until so we have 4 more folks, and these are, by the way, this is all really incredible. Everything everyone is sharing. Part of, I just want to make one last comment before we go to the next person, that part of the idea of trauma-informed care and interventions for trauma is that instead of it being a top-down approach of developing interventions, including people with lived experience in the process of figuring out what works best for whom is a really important part of being trauma-informed and developing interventions. And so I think it's really a special thing that we're able to have, a group of clinical psychologists here, and psychologists, and then, folks with lived experience who are sharing. And we all know that this is not a therapy session. It's not therapy. It's a professional science communication event. And yet hearing the experiences of folks, I think, is really informative for being about prevention development. So thank you all so much for being so vulnerable and sharing these incredibly profound experiences that you've had. So with that, I will go to Spartan.
I just want to first welcome to Innerworld, and thank you for the people on the panel today for being here and taking your time out of your day to be here with us. And I put on the wall a survivor. My daughter was tragically killed, and I was diagnosed with PTSD from that. Before I got here, there was no group settings at all for grief. I didn't know what grief was, and I had a very demanding job, which I wasn't able to reach out and be able to show much emotion with the job that I had. So I ran in the world, and when I was able to feel, and I was able to show emotion, and it was okay to do that. And the thing that I like most about this world is the guides. They feel and they have emotion, and they have been there with us, and they walk with us through every bit of the way, and they're open for talk if you need them, and so I was a day away from suicide. And if you look above our heads, this is how many months we are. And I have 5 months of life, and that's the way I look at it. And I will continue on working on myself and knowing that now that wasn't an option for me, that there is life. And I just want to tell you guys how grateful I am for Noah and this world and the people in it. They're very close to my heart, and it saved my life. So with that, thank you for letting me share, and I really appreciate it.
Thank you,
Thank you so
Spartan.
much. Yeah. Wow,
Thanks,
Spartan,
Spartan. We love you.
yeah,
Love you,
you're
Spartan.
and I want to say that the thing that saved, it's so incredible to hear that it saved your life. And I know people are thanking me and things like that, which I'm grateful for, but really the people who are saving lives are all of you. You are saving each other, you are helping each other. And that is the whole theme of this, I think, and especially with trauma, hearing the power of this peer support, that by coming together as a community and having these non-judgmental interactions where that's safe, with the strict community guidelines, the kind of guardrails on the interactions, the healing that can happen is just so profound and powerful. And when we're 5 million therapists for the United States alone, I think that we have to look to these kinds of solutions. So it's really everyone in the audience who is helping to create these profound effects. So thank you, Spartan, so much for sharing about that. I don't know if anyone on the panel wanted to add anything as well before we go to the next speaker as well.
I would. I'm working on an intervention right now. It's not an intervention, maybe something more personal, but I also lost my son when he was 6. And it was, I don't think I knew what PTSD was, nor did I really quite understand it till maybe 10 years later, that's what I was actually going through. But one of the goals that kind of a project that I've been working on, it's funded and it's through Yale, and it has a purpose, but it's really to try to help those that are caring or working with parents that have lost a child to better understand how it is a lifelong process. It is something that you have, it is something you will have and you know, kind of, I don't want to say cope or deal with, it's just, but it is who you are now for the rest of your life. But trying to help others try to understand that and use.
Oh no.
Oh, bummer.
I hope she's okay.
Yes, I
She
think there's
did. She
an
didn't
internet.
move.
Yes,
Make
yes, I
sure
think
you
she'll be right
move every
back.
once in a while.
Oh, that's what the issue is.
Yeah, you gotta move.
She's
Yeah,
teleport
that's
mode,
why
so
I'm.
she's not teleporting. Oh my gosh. Okay,
Yeah.
that's good to know, and we will fix that. Sorry, everyone. I'm sorry that code issue is leaving that. Does anyone else on the panel want to add anything? I just want to keep us on this thread until Kim gets back. So does anyone on the panel also want to add anything? Yeah.
Yeah, I can add something really fast. So yeah, I really appreciate just hearing all these stories, and it is really just wonderful to just to kind of bear witness to everyone's experiences, and thank you so much for sharing. And this idea of like these guides, like they are playing such a huge role. And some of my prior work is kind of looking at these digital treatments where it's more self-guided, like an application on your cell phone, or kind of joining like an online program where you're doing it by yourself. But we really see that these digital interventions can be more effective when there is some kind of support along the way. And so really having this opportunity to have this world where there are people in it together really can make a huge difference. And so again, yeah, thank you for sharing.
Thank you.
Yes, I think. Thank you, Ione. Steve, were you gonna add something as well? And I think Kim just came back in as well, so she'll be here in a sec.
Let me let Kim go first.
I think she's still making her way, unless
Just here. From an evolutionary perspective, we are wired up to be particularly sensitive to the loss of a child, a variety of other things, and that's good as far as it goes. That helps keep our infants alive. On the other hand, when we get stuck is when we start blaming ourselves for things that may have been outside of our control. And getting on top of that is an incredibly useful process, and support groups really help doing that.
Interesting. Thank you for sharing that, Steve. And I see, yes, and I see Kim, you are back. One thing we learned is that you have to, every few minutes or like every 5 minutes, if you teleport, right, if you point your hand at the ground and just teleport just once, I think it's timing you out is the issue. You have to just move around.
Okay.
Yeah, so sorry about that. That's a glitch we will fix. But if you want to continue, I think you were just starting to share about the program.
Yeah, no, I can. I was just going to say, I think one of the, you know, one of the big processes of doing this was I interviewed. I mean, my son died 19 years ago, so it's been a while. But I've been going to interviewing my family and my friends, his school teachers, people in the community. I just wanted to create this story, and I thought it was my story about the loss of my child, but it turned out to be a greater community story. And I didn't know so much of the story. I didn't know how much his tiny little life impacted an entire community. So I don't know, again, that power of connection to people, like you were saying, Noah, talking about that, and just, I don't know, it's been really powerful. So this thing that I'm working on, this VR experience around my experience as a parent, the loss of a child, has turned into this story around more of our narrative, the community's narrative, and how that's when you try to put all of that together. But the goal of that is just to try to show how, you know, grief and loss of a child is very different in terms of an expected kind of when we expect our parents to die before us, or grandparents, right, our elderly neighbors, but not children. So it's very, very difficult to kind of wrap your head around for your entire life. So yeah, so just trying to even use this kind of technology to create social story and narratives together, and finding meaning making. I think we can do that in really powerful ways through community and connection to people. Even for a story that we thought was our own, it really helps to share it and create a bigger story, I think.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think that's really powerful. And thank you, Kim, as well, for sharing about your own experience. And I think it's incredible how you're using qualitative research as well, where, you know, we talked about I think folks will share a little bit more about their research in as the next folks share, but qualitative research being a very powerful way. We use numbers to track changes in symptoms and other kind of things like that, but really qualitative research where you're asking people questions and trying to understand themes and connections that can lead to really new interventions to be developed, new ways of creating interventions. So thank you for sharing about that project. It's very exciting.
My dissertation chair told me once, we live in stories, not statistics. And that has stuck with me forever. And so I think I'm a true qualitative researcher because of that, because it's true. The numbers say a lot, but it's where the stories are where we find the meaning.
Very wise
Love
advisor.
that.
There's a context of discovery, and that almost always comes from stories, personal experience. Then there's a context of confirmation, which is where you test things out. But you got to start with an anecdote. You got to start with a personal experience. And every new therapy that's ever been developed that's worked has started that way.
Yeah, that's fascinating. Thank you. Artnut, do you want to go next?
Yeah, sure. There's just one thing that one point I want to raise, which hasn't been mentioned yet, and that is how instant this is, in the sense that
Arnott, you're a little bit maybe far from your microphone. If you could get a little bit closer.
Is that better?
Yeah, I think that's a little bit better.
Yeah, I was just going to say that how instant this is, in the sense that like I could wake up at 2:00 in the morning, feeling really down, and have someone to come and talk to. And that is really, really powerful compared to trying to sort of like organize something in the real world. And I've noticed that even with when others come in and there's just something that's happened, and they'll go to the guide straight away and have like a private conversation. This is really, really powerful. It's so good to be able to sort of have this as an instant way to work through your problems. I just wanted to mention that.
Thank you. Yeah, I think the accessibility is important, and I think it's there's a lot of research questions as well. If someone's has a history of trauma, for example, is experiencing a trigger or a flashback and things like that, just the knowledge that they can come in and talk to someone immediately about it and feel comfortable opening up. How does that impact someone's sense of psychological safety? Even does that help? One thing about PTSD is that a self-fulfilling prophecy almost, because you become trying to avoid thinking about the trigger leads to the maintenance of those symptoms, and that's why therapy is very powerful, is that you have someone lean into re-experiencing what they've been trying to avoid. But it's interesting to think about the increased sense of safety that community can provide for someone, and how that might impact that instant access to a safe, non-judgmental community, those non-specific effects, and how that could affect the trajectory of PTSD. I think that's a open kind of research question as well.
Not only a research question, but we know a few things, is that most trained professional clinicians are more avoidant of dealing with the trauma than their clients are. Clients tend to avoid, and their therapists especially tend to avoid. When the American Psychological Association did a review of the empirical data on treatment of PTSD, the three things they recommended were exposure, exposure, and exposure. And they published that, and 40,000 members of the American Psychological Association asked to have it because they didn't do that. That's over 2/3 of the membership. And it's striking how most professional therapists are more resistant to dealing with that with their clients than clients are, these kind of self-help groups are.
I'd like to weigh in on that as well. I think you bring up a really good point. I always say, certainly what we're doing is hard medicine for a hard problem, but it's what the science shows works, confronting and reprocessing difficult emotional memories, but with social support or with the support of a therapist. That's really the path that all the science points us towards. And there's so many different variants of ways that exposure can be done. I mean, the Edna FOA approach, the prolonged exposure, is just one of them. I would say that, many have, EMDR has an exposure element. We're not sure, how much that contributes to the value of it, but, and cognitive processing therapy. I mean, writing a narrative about your experience is a form of exposure. So, I think this is where some of the value of technology comes in. Certainly, we've seen it in our work with VR exposure therapy, where you can put a veteran in a combat environment, but with everything calm, sitting out in a Humvee in the desert, and kind of, get them talking about their experience in a way that isn't so confrontive, but eventually be able to systematically control the stimuli and ramp it up so that the person can, at a pace they can handle, start to, dig into that trauma narrative in an emotional way. And I think that's really the power of these sorts of simulated environments. And certainly, when we first got started, and when Barbara Rothbaum got started, in 1998 with Virtual Vietnam, there was a lot of criticism by traditional exposure therapists even, and forget about them, the people that didn't use exposure, didn't believe in it. They were highly critical. They were saying, oh, you're going to re-traumatize people. You're going to, have all these ill effects. And I'm happy to say that people that have done deterioration analyses and have looked at VR exposure compared to other active treatments, you don't see any increment in those kinds of negative effects. And in fact, you see a lot of positives. So, sometimes, the people that are psychologists that maybe were trained many years ago, they're still using the science and the application that they learned at graduate school. They haven't kept up to date. Not a total criticism of everybody in psychology, because certainly people in the last 30, 40 years, been brought up in an empirical clinician model. And I think that's important. You've got to look at the science and what drives all this. Anyway, I'll shut up now.
Don't shut up, but Skip's absolutely correct. And I got to say, it was my own graduate students who were getting experiences away from our training program with the Sexual Assault Research Center that shamed me into doing it with a couple of my clients. And when I started doing it, it just worked better. And again, experienced therapists are often overly avoidant to doing these kind of things, but some kind of exposure and then dealing with what you think it means about you, which it almost never does, is the single most effective thing we have.
Very interesting. Yeah. And I think, Skip, what you've also mentioned is something Steve has mentioned, which is that training of therapists, like to change the way a therapist does something, is generational. It's not, it's hard to have a therapist who's been working for 20 years doing things one way, and then evidence shows that doing something a different way is better or it could be more effective. It's hard to change the way that a therapist is doing something versus trainees, who are learning, oh, this is the best evidence-based way to do it. This is how you approach, treating trauma or something, treating a specific type of disorder. So that's one unique advantage, I think, of Innerworld. Although therapy, we're training guides every month, and so you can update the training much faster because it doesn't take 7 years of graduate school to get to the point of delivering an evidence-based tool or teaching an evidence-based tool. So updating training methods, I think, is a really interesting theme kind of that's coming out of this as well, in terms of making sure it's evidence-based and that we're, helping folks with trauma get the best interventions that they can. So I want to go to Calm Llama.
Yeah, mine was really quick because I've obviously shared before, but I want to know where I could find more information, especially Kim. I'm a special educational needs and trauma behaviour teacher specialist in the UK. And I'm incredibly interested about your research because I deal with the students that have been suspended or completely thrown out of education, or they're moving because they're in the care system. So that's my daily job, and I'd love to know about and what Steve, was it Steve? Is it Holland was saying earlier about Tetris and trauma, because that's exactly what I did as a child when I was going through my trauma, which is why I never understood why it was hitting me in my 20s and 30s. So I'm really interested to know where I could find out more about your research, basically.
Oh yeah, so you know, the work we do is not trauma specific. It's more prevention. We're looking at a lot of skill building around, you know, a lot of DBTA, you know, in schools, which, you know, DBT that's been, you know, translated for schools and younger populations, adolescents especially. Emotion regulation, like I talked about, coping skills, a lot of that early stuff that we can put into prevention. But I'm happy if to kind of share, you know, the stuff we're working on and some of the great researchers at Yale that I get to work on, that this is like their main every day-to-day focus. So I don't know how to get that information to you, but I'm happy to connect you.
Noah, what do you suggest?
Yeah, we can definitely do a follow information. I think we can probably send an email out to folks, and if you haven't heard, just message me on Discord, and I'll it'll be a prompt to do it. But yeah, we can send follow-up information as well of what was discussed. I think it's a great idea. Yeah, Steve.
Yeah, I'd be happy to share some papers and so on that pass over to you if I pass them to Noah or something.
Yeah, that'd be fantastic.
And this is Steve. The two things to focus on for more, conventional, it's cutting edge and probably as good as anything else in the field. The cognitive therapy person at Oxford is Anke Ehlers, E-H-L-E-R-S. I think she also has research going on at the Maudsley down in London, but she's absolutely top of the field. And then the person with the Tetris is Emily Holmes, who used to be at Oxford, actually had Anke's office when Oxford was down at the Maudsley, and now Anke's moved back, so she's Emily is off at the Karolinska, but she's the person, that cognitive psychologist, who's doing the work with Tetris and other video games to cut right into the midst of the trauma. And we're just light years ahead of what we used to be able to do 2-3 decades ago.
Wonderful. Incredible. Thank you so much.
Can I throw in a quick pitch as well?
Yeah.
On Saturday at ISTSS at 9:30, we have a session on using VR and associated technologies with I'm sorry. One of the speakers, Jessica Stone, will be presenting on her virtual sand tray application for children. And this is a way for children to represent their trauma in a fashion that isn't as confrontive, that they can build worlds with archetypic objects, like in traditional play therapy. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that, where you have physical objects and everything. Well, you've got a virtual version now with over 6,000 pieces of content that a child can use to represent their world, their feeling state, and so on. And so she'll be presenting as part of that. And also one other thing, we're doing something similar to Innerworld, but in Romania, with the spherical image-based virtual metaverse world, where we've taken spherical images of common places in Ukraine, and we have software that allows, similar to this, for people, Ukrainian refugees, to gather and to be able to talk about their experiences, talk about their grief, loss, and their hopes. Because we really strongly feel social support and being able to tell your story is important. And this is one of the problems